Hello picture book creators, here we are, finally at the end of your journey, and you will by now have put together and created a beautiful picture book that's made up of great words and wonderful images, even if they're only at this stage in your head, and creating a beautiful artifact that will suit the reader, be they the toddler sitting on Granny's knee or Granny herself. So I hope you're very content with where you've come to on this journey. Of course, I am aware that now you may be ready to send it somewhere else. Now, whether you want to send it somewhere else and where you want to send it to will depend entirely on what your motivation for writing your picture book was in the first place. But anyway, I'm going to give you some guidelines now as to how you can add that final sprinkle of pixie dust to make sure that it looks as great as it possibly can if and when you do want to send it off somewhere else. So one of the things I mentioned in the PDF was formatting. Now, formatting of your picture books is important. It's going to make a big difference to how the publisher, if that's where you're sending it, views your manuscript. So you're going to want to make this look as professional as you can. It certainly needs to be neat and tidy and not be off-putting in any way with spelling mistakes and those things that we discussed during the PDF. So let's have a look at what some of those formatting issues would be. By formatting, I mean what the layout of it should be on the page. So here are some quick guidelines that you will follow whatever you're writing, but it applies also to picture books. You should write your manuscript in a nice clear font, something like Times New Roman or Calibri, or something of that nature that's just nice and open and clear. Arial will do. And you want to put it into 12-point font. And that again is to make it easy for the editor, or whoever it is that's receiving it, to read your manuscript. Now don't go overboard and start putting in different size fonts and imagining that you're the designer and you're putting big words across the page and so on. You can do that a tiny little bit if it really, really matters in one significant point. But generally, try and keep all your words in that standard 12-point font of something clear like Times New Roman. And then this issue of spacing. All manuscripts should be double-spaced. And that again is to make the manuscript easy for someone to read. In more recent times, it's been so that they can print it off and write in the spaces as well. But generally, it just makes it easy to read for the receiving person. So, by double-spaced, I mean that there is a line missed between each line of writing. But you don't do that by doing enter. That will make your manuscript very messy. What you do is go to your home toolbar in Word, and you go to paragraph, and in the paragraph drop-down menu, there is an option for putting in spacing. So you there find double-spaced, or click number 2. And that will double-space your whole manuscript for you. If you do that at the beginning, as you're starting, then it will do that automatically. If not, then highlight your whole document, which you can do by pressing Control-A, and then go to paragraph and press number 2. So that's how to double-space your manuscript. Now, I did also mention that the general rule with all manuscripts is that you either indent and then don't miss an extra line in between new speakers or new paragraphs, or you don't indent and you do miss a line between each. And here I have an example of each of those for you. So the first one is, it is indented, that is, I've tabbed at the beginning of a line, and that creates just a little indentation so that the sentence moves across slightly. You do that for the beginning of new speakers or new paragraphs, not every line. And so it's indented, but then I don't miss extra lines in between. The other one is not indented, that is, all the left-hand words are flush to the margin, and I do miss a line between new speakers and new paragraphs. Now you can see from this that for your picture book, which can be very short sentences anyway, the second way, the don't indent but do miss a line, can make your picture book look very spread out. In general terms, I tend always to use the first version which is to indent and then not miss lines. That's a more traditional way of presenting your manuscript. It works for me, and it takes up less space on the page. So it's easier to see all your work together. So that's up to you. Either is fine, as long as whichever you choose, you stick to it. So those are some examples of how you need to format your manuscript itself. But also, when you're sending off your papers, your lovely story, you're going to have to include some other things. In general terms, publishers will tell you in their information that they would like a cover sheet, a synopsis, and a covering letter of some kind. Now, for picture books, it's not really worth adding a synopsis because it's going to take them as long to read that as it is to read the actual manuscript itself. And you can also get into the trap of over-explaining things and describing how your family loved this and all those things that we don't want to do because they are heart-sink moments for the editor, as we've discovered throughout this module. But you will need to include a cover sheet, which is just a brief piece of information to show the publisher or the editor or the competition provider that you know what you're doing with your manuscript. And your cover sheet is just simple. I've got an example here for you. You put your title in an interesting font if you wish to. You will put what it is, so a picture book. You will then put your name, that it's by you, and you will also put in your word count. Now you can either put your word count centrally and under your name, or you can put it in the right-hand bottom corner. That's, again, up to you. Depends if you want it out of the way or not. But it might be quite nice to show that it's only 550 words, and therefore you really thought about what it takes to make a picture book. And that can be up front and central. Then, what you also want is your details, probably in the bottom left-hand corner. So you'll see there that I've put my name, my address, and you really want to put down any way that they can contact you should they wish to. So that will be your phone numbers and your email address. Don't go overboard and start putting in Twitter names and Facebook pages and so on, but just some basic details as to how they can get hold of you. If you do happen to have an agent, this is where your agent's details would go. So you would put in your agent's name instead there. So that's your cover sheet. And you can do it separately to your manuscript, but just make sure that it's attached as well. So it's just a little introduction to the editor or the publisher as to what you created. And then the letter. Now, I've known people spend years creating beautiful books and getting them to a state of perfection who then freeze completely over their cover letter. You really don't need to. Honestly, the receiving person is not all that interested, that they're going to get straight to your story. And then, if they're interested in your story, they will come back and look at the other details that you sent them. So your cover letter just needs to cover 3 things. First of all, you want to say what your book is. Secondly, you want to say who you are. And thirdly, you want to say where it might fit in their list, which is a chance to show that you've investigated them a little bit and that you genuinely feel there is a match with their book. So again, I've included a quick example here. So you will just say in the book section, this is my book, it's called this, it's for them, and it has a word count of such and such. In the bit about me, this is where you do not say, I've read this to my class, my neighbour's kids, my grandchildren, and they absolutely loved it. That's the classic place where people put that information, and it's very off-putting for the editor, for the publisher. So here's where you just state simply something about yourself, which indicates that you have more books in you. That's really what they're looking for. They want some indication that you will go on to write more books. So here is where you might say if you've won any awards, if you've done a writing course with somebody notable, if you've had anything published, and that can include journalism, short stories, whatever, it doesn't matter as long as it shows that you are writing things that are of publishable quality. If you don't have anything like that, that's also fine. Just show that you are in a position to carry on writing. And don't go overboard explaining how your 3 children take up your day and you can squeeze it into your midnight hour or whatever. Just say, I'm a mum or a dad and I am committed to writing and I'm planning the next few. That's really all you need to discuss. And as I say, don't really worry about a synopsis. It's not going to add anything and it will probably take up more time than reading the manuscript itself. Now, all of this needs to look very professional. Mostly we send our manuscripts by email these days, so that same cover letter detail could be the format of your email, and the cover letter will just go on top of your manuscript. So it could be added to it as page 1 of your manuscript if you're sending it by email. But I've talked as well about how professional and slick and grammatically correct your manuscript needs to look. So if you're worried about that kind of aspect, then I really strongly recommend that you get somebody else to look at it. And by somebody else, because even though we have well-intentioned friends, and we all know people who tell you they are great at proofing, it's often the case that they know a little bit more than you, but not 100% more than you. So certainly an editor or a manuscript assessor will have a very good idea of how this should look and what grammatical or spelling or typing mistakes you've made. So how do you find one of those? Well, again, you can Google manuscript assessors and editors and proofreaders. There are bound to be many of them around in your area, and you will know which you need more. A manuscript assessor will look more at the structure of your story, at your characterization, at how you've pulled it all together, as well as, in my case, looking at all the errors and the typos and the grammatical things that need changing. A proofreader will only look at the typos and the errors. So if you know that your slight downfall is that you sometimes put a comma in the wrong place, then go to a proofreader. If you're not sure about your story overall, then go to a manuscript assessor. And in New Zealand, you can find them under the New Zealand Association of Manuscript Assessors, and wherever you are, they're bound to have a group of manuscript assessors and editors who can provide these kind of services for you. I strongly, strongly recommend you get a professional to do it if you're at all unsure of any element of your manuscript. Because what you're doing now is adding the very final pizzazz to make sure that there's nothing going to put off somebody who's reading your manuscript. So, where are you going to send it? You've got your beautiful manuscript, it's looking fantastic, you have perhaps put in your picture ideas or your artist brief, and you're very, very happy now and confident that it's ready to go somewhere. Well, as I discussed, that's going to be down to you where you want to send it. Not everybody wants to be published. Some people want to hand these things on to their offspring or their grandchildren. Some people want to just write it for themselves because the story has been in their head forever and they really need to get it out. But if you do want to see it on a bookshelf one day, then here's what you do. You will look for the kind of publishers who publish the books that you like. So I've mentioned already Walker Books have a particular style of picture book. So if your dream is to produce something that looks like that, then go to Walker Books. So you're going to have to do some investigation, reading through your picture books, looking who publishes them, and also looking out for new publishers who are also going along those same routes. So particular publishers will take on a definitive style, and it's up to you to investigate and see who suits your style as well. So once you've highlighted who that is, you can either Google them and find out some information. Most publishers have a website and they will have information on there as to how you can submit your manuscript. If they say they don't accept unsolicited manuscripts, that means that they won't accept them without an agent. However, for picture books, agents are very hard to find because the picture book market, as you can imagine, with all that information you've received over the last 8 weeks, is very saturated, and it's also an expensive product to bring to market because of all the work that goes into it and the various people that have to input and the quality of the paper and the hardback covers and so on. So there are fewer picture books published than other forms of books, and agents find it harder and harder to sell those on behalf of you. You're far more likely to be able to do it yourself. So if you are a picture book writer, first and foremost, personally I wouldn't worry about getting an agent unless you're applying to the UK or US markets, in which case you will need to find one. And you can find all of this information about agents and publishers and editors in the Writers and Artists Yearbook, which you can find in bookshops, which is online, and which you can certainly get in libraries. And in there is listing of all the publishers in the world, and the agents, and the editors, and magazines, and various parts of information that will be helpful for you as you're going onwards in this journey. So you might have to flick through a few pages to find your actual publisher that you're hoping to apply to, but persevere, you'll get there, and what you're hoping to do is get to the name of somebody that you can send your manuscript off to, because it's going to look much better if you're directing it at an individual rather than just at the publishing house. An alternative to sending it off to publishers is to try for competitions. In New Zealand, we have some excellent competitions, and the Joy Cowley Award is a great way to get your book in front of Scholastic, who are probably the biggest publishers of picture books in New Zealand. So the Joy Cowley Award and other awards are listed on the Storyline website, and the deadline is the 31st of October each year. So aim towards that, get something in, and the prize, if you win, is publication, which is very nice. Now, what's also good is that they don't accept a winner every year, so sometimes if the standard's not good enough, they don't award the prize to anybody. So that shows that they're looking at these things critically. So check out those kind of competitions. Wherever you are, your local Society of Authors will normally list competitions that are happening nationally or regionally in some cases. So have a look at your Society of Authors and perhaps think about joining up with those. They generally have a low fee, and they're excellent at supporting writers old and new. So do have a look at your local Society of Authors and consider joining up. Now, what about if you're not intending getting published? Or what about if you don't want to send it off to a traditional publisher, you want to do something else? Well, there are many, many more options these days, which is very exciting for us as picture book writers, because it means that you don't have to necessarily wait for someone to take your book on. You can do more about it yourself. Now, even though, as we know, picture books are complex, there is still the potential to self-publish through companies like Lulu.com, who will put together your work for you, add in your illustrations, and help you with some fundamental basic design work. Or, of course, you can find a designer to put everything together for you. So self-publishing is an option. It's expensive if you want to go to print, because as we discussed already, the paper costs a lot of money, the size of them is generally quite large, the hardback covers particularly cost a lot of money, so they are expensive products to put together. And if you're doing that yourself, including paying an illustrator and paying a designer, then you are going to find the costs racking up. But those are not the only options these days either. You could consider doing your picture book these days as an e-book. Now, e-book technology in the past has not been great for picture books. It's not really been capable of reproducing the images terribly well, but now we're getting there. We're getting to the stage where it is possible to produce a beautiful, beautiful looking e-book. And the conversion cost of taking it from Illustrator files and putting it into e-book format is tiny compared with the cost of producing a whole printed book. There are some companies, and Ruckus in the US are one, who these days are only taking on e-books, and those are picture books as e-books. So it is a growing trend, and it's something that is very exciting, because what they can also do then is extend the functionality of the e-book, of the picture book, and turn it into either an enhanced e-book, which will mean that certain parts of the book will appear to come to life and it will move. You might have a soundtrack with it, or an audio version of somebody reading the story, or even an app, which is where you will be able to connect with background information. So you may scroll over a particular part of your picture book and be given information on the background research that went into it. So there's lots and lots of possibilities these days that are very exciting. And of course an obvious one, which has always been popular, and you just have to listen to Julia Donaldson in order to understand this, is that your picture book could also be produced as a song. So songs, CDs, in books, or sometimes MP3 downloads are great ways to get your story out there, particularly if you've written in rhyme and it really works. That's how Julia Donaldson started, busking with her lovely words, and look where it got her. So I think it's something to be strongly considered if that's the way that you want to go. So all in all, a heap of options of what you can do now with your creation, depending on what you want to achieve with it. It's entirely down to you. It's a very personal choice, and picture books particularly tend to often be about very personal moments for people. So make sure that whatever you're doing with your creation now is what suits you. Most of all, you should be proud. You've made and created something beautiful now, and that is the joy of picture book writing, is that you can capture wonderful imaginative stories and make them appropriate for whoever it is that you want to read them, to share with you. So I hope you've enjoyed this journey. I really do trust that you've created something you're proud of and that you love, and maybe one day the rest of us will be able to love it with you. Happy writing.